Hello, my name is Amit Pawa, and in this video I'm going to re-record my Bruce Scott lecture that featured as the keynote lecture at RAUK's meeting in London in May this year. The theme of the meeting was a James Bond theme, and at the request of the then President Alan McFarlane, I posed for a picture here. In fact, Alan gave me a very kind introduction to the lecture, which even featured some poetry, which hopefully you'll be able to see at some stage. And then I got on stage and started my lecture. So that was my face when I first heard that I was going to be nominated as a Bruce Scott Lecturer for 2024. And really, the reason for that was, at first, I was afraid. I was petrified. Well, why was I petrified? Well, because some of the previous Bruce Scott lecturers have really influenced my career. If you just look at some of them over here, you'll see these are the great and good of regional anaesthesia. These folks have pushed the boundaries, written the papers, and some of them have even changed the way that I deliver my lectures and inspired my style. So I started to get what can only be described as imposter syndrome. But as soon as those thoughts entered into my mind, I decided I needed to channel my inner Rosie. And for those of you who don't know, this is Dr. Rosie Hogg. And I know what Rosie would have said to me when she started hearing me saying things. She would have said, just crack on. So with that in mind, I'm going to start the lecture. The lecture was called Beyond the Needle, and what I was hoping to do over the next half an hour or so is to talk about exploring the evolving landscape of regional anaesthesia in the digital age. Now, a dad joke alert here, there may be a few jokes through the lecture. There will be some poetic license. What do I mean by that? Well, you know, if you ask a chef or a gardener to make you a dish or plant some flowers, you know they'll do what they ask you, but they'll also add in a little bit of extra spice. And so I apologise in advance for the fact that I may be taking this in a slightly different direction. I'm going to cover what I learned about Bruce Scott from his son Nick Scott, and I was fortunate enough to have a chat with Nick Scott, who was also an anaesthetist, and I learned a lot about his father from that discussion. I'm then going to spend some time talking to you about my journey into regional anaesthesia. I'm going to give you my personal experience of educational regional anaesthesia, and then focus on the crux of the talk, which is regional anaesthesia education in the digital age. And I will thank people as I go through, but I will finish off with some thanks to people who have helped me along the way. So let's start off with Donald Bruce Scott. He had two great passions in life, work and family, and I know that will resonate with many people. He was born in 1925 in Sydney, Australia, and he founded ESRA, the European Society of Regional Anaesthesia, and, as it was known then, ESRA Great Britain and Ireland, which, as you know, has now become RAUK. So not only was Bruce Scott part of the founding group for ESRA and RAUK, he was also rather presidential, holding the post of president of ESRA Great Britain and Ireland, the Scottish Society of Anaesthetists, and the Obstetric Anaesthetists Association, and they also have a Bruce Scott lecture held in his name. Now, Bruce Scott had a love of music, golf, whiskey and wine, and at least two of those I share in common with him. He was a talented chef and could fix his own car, and in addition to teaching regional anaesthesia, he loved teaching cardiovascular physiology as well. I think most impressively, he completed a PhD on epidurals when he was a trainee, and on retirement, he was presented with a golden needle. The other thing about Bruce Scott is he didn't enjoy people who spoke for the sake of it. So with that in mind, I'm going to crack on by talking to you about my journey into regional anaesthesia, and I want to start off with a quote. The influence of a great teacher can never be erased, and I was very fortunate in that I came across a lot of great teachers during my career who have helped me along the way. So I started my anaesthetics rotation in Medway, Maritime in Kent, where everybody did some regional anaesthesia, and I want to give a shout out to two people in particular. This is Dr. Graham Sanders and Dr. Manikundalam Badranath. These folks did all types of regional anaesthesia in addition to, of course, standard general anaesthesia, and during that year I really cut my teeth on using landmark techniques and nerve stimulation techniques, and mainly did spinals, interscaling nerve blocks, femoral sciatic, and we did a whole host of penile nerve blocks as well as lumbar plexus blocks. So that kind of gave me my introduction. And then moved for my second year in anaesthesia to Guy's and St Thomas's, and was fortunate to benefit from the teaching from these two people, the late Geraldine O'Sullivan and Dr Leslie D'Souza. So I worked with both of these, and Geraldine was very well known for her role in obstetric anaesthesia, and Leslie D'Souza did just about everything. And in fact, I did my first paresthesia guided axillary brachial plexus block with Leslie D'Souza, and I learned a lot of my spinals with Geraldine O'Sullivan. We did bits and bobs, so I kind of just got a flavour of general anaesthesia, but not specifically a massive focus on regional. I then moved on to the rest of my training, and I was in South London and Kent, and it was mainly a case of peripheral nerve stimulator guided blocks. You do see one, do one, and that was it, until I came across these three individuals. This is Dr. Sanjay Gulati, Dr. Imad Aziz, and Dr. Rafael Blanco. Now, these guys came into my teaching and my training just at the same time that ultrasound for regional anaesthesia was taking off, and I really sort of ignited my passion in ultrasound guided regional anaesthesia, and as a result of that I decided to apply for the first regional anaesthesia fellowship that was held at Guy's and St Thomas's, and during that 6-month period we did ultrasound guided supraclavicular brachial plexus blocks. We did mainly nerve stimulator guided interscalenes, but this is an ultrasound image from my first ultrasound guided interscaling brachial plexus block, and I did this with Rafa Blanco. We also did ultrasound guided axillary and forearm blocks, the standard lower limb blocks and ilioinguinal blocks, and we even did lumbar and cervical plexus. Now, I managed to find my logbook from when I did this fellowship. Can you guess how many blocks I did? Well, I was surprised because the number was only 206 blocks. So it's not surprising, however, that the majority of the learning I've done subsequently has been as a consultant. And I was lucky in that I had some great mentors here. Here's Raf Blanco, John McDonnell and Morne Woolmarins. I also had the opportunity to meet some great regional anaesthetists, Jeff Gadsden and Teresa Paris, and by combination of meeting them at lectures and courses, they were able to inspire me and give me a few more ideas and opportunities. I also had people advocate for me. This is Professor Keejin Chin, who helped me along my way and gave me opportunities that perhaps I wouldn't have had otherwise. And on top of all of this, I had a little bit of luck. It's not just about luck, but as a wise man once said, the harder you work, the luckier you get. So what's my personal experience of educational and regional anaesthesia? Well, actually, if I think back, I used a lot of textbooks and I did actually write notes. I read the occasional journal article, but I really benefited from in-theatre hands-on education, and I attended quite a few face-to-face courses. But when I attended these courses, I noticed that the cost varied significantly, but so did the quality. And then Raf Blanco had set up the London Society of Regional Anaesthesia, and he recruited new faculty, of which I was one of them, and we were given the opportunity to run the society with the aim of producing high quality courses. And these are a few pictures of some of the faculty in the early days of the meetings. These are a lot of friends that I've learnt how to perform, but also had to teach regional anaesthesia with along the years, and you may recognise some of those faces. We prided ourselves on getting speakers to come in and do high quality lectures, but we realised that a lot also hung on the quality of workshops and live demonstrations. So these are some snaps from some of the early days when we had of our workshop for these ELSORA courses, and you can see we're even using some, there's a pig model at the bottom there where we're using Vicente Roquez was teaching us how to do paravertebrals and intercostal nerve blocks. But we really learned quite early on that anatomy is key. And in those early stages, we were able to work with Professor Vishy Mahadevan and Sir Harold Ellis, some really great anatomists associated with the Royal College of Surgeons, and they helped add that extra level of detail when it came to understanding regional anaesthesia. So this is how I found my first passion in regional anaesthesia, in fact, and that was because I got one-to-one teaching from an incredible chap called John McDonnell, and I really got into thoracic paravertebral blocks. And it's thanks to people like John, to Rafa Blanco and to Manoj Kamarka who really inspired me, and actually that's why the paravertebral is my favourite block today. After ELSORA, I was then lucky enough to get a role on the board of RAUK, and during the period of time that I was president, we managed to grow our membership. We gave it a new look. we had to deal, like all of us did, with COVID-19 and very quickly pivot from a face-to-face meeting to a virtual meeting. And the rest, as they say, is history. And if you look at how RAUK has developed and grown now, it's really a great testament, and it's real thanks to the people that are running the show now. So congratulations, RAUK, and growing the society to what it is now. And I've got some very fond memories of my time in RAUK. The picture on the top left was fortuitous because that was myself whilst I was president, Alan McFarlane, who succeeded me as president, and then Nat Haslam, who then took over from Alan. So that was a fortunate photograph. And you can see lots of memories of times that I spent during my time at RAUK. So now let's get on onto the crux of the talk: regional anaesthesia in the education in the digital age. Why is it relevant now? Well, it's really relevant now for a number of reasons. Here are a few papers here. Here, the European Society of Anesthesiology and Intensive Care Guidelines on the use of ultrasound, a regional anaesthesia training in the UK National Survey, and a mixed methods analysis looking at regional anaesthesia education for consultants and specialists in the UK. And those QR codes will take you to the papers. So I'm going to summarise what these papers respectively said. So they do say that ultrasound is recommended for Plan A block regional anaesthesia, but they also highlighted the fact that there's a disparity in regional anaesthesia training in the UK, and specifically that was affected for chest and abdominal wall blocks. People don't feel so confident in learning and teaching and performing those blocks. But what we did notice is if your department had a regional anaesthesia lead, that improved training. And when people were performing blocks, they only really felt confident when they performed more than 20 blocks. They also talk about how there's a benefit of having a structured training program. Now, when it comes to our teachers being able to teach regional anaesthesia, there were gaps in the proficiency and training of consultants and specialists, and actually only 22% of consultants and specialists felt confident in all Plan A blocks. That's a problem, I think. And interestingly, those that had the most experience and more than 10 years experience were least confident. And relevant to this lecture, one of the things that these papers talked about was the potential benefit of lectures, video, e-learning and simulation. The reason is we've got all of this information at our fingertips. Why do we have this information at our fingertips? Because we are using these devices all the time. You've all got computers, you may have tablets, and you've got smartphones. And if you have these items in your possession, a whole world of education lies ahead of you. So let's start off by talking about how we can improve our education with anatomy. And clearly, the way that we're learning anatomy is changing. When I started performing regional anaesthesia and learning about regional anaesthesia, I relied heavily on books. In fact, I even took out some of my textbooks from medical school. But now, if you look at my phone, I've got a whole host of apps that help me to understand anatomy in a way that was not available to me when I was training. So I'm going to give you an example. This is the 3D4 Medical app. You can actually highlight anatomy, label it, move it around in 3D and understand the 3D anatomical relationships between those structures. Now, I've taken this a next stage further. When I've produced some of my educational videos, I've now applied a video overlay where I've got an ultrasound image and I put a virtual probe on this 3D anatomy so people can understand where the probe lies in real space, and you can understand how you move the probe and generate different videos. And there's something else you can do that's very, very clever. So just using my phone, there's me looking at a 3D spine, a real 3D spine, and trying to understand how to perform a midline and then a paramedian approach to a spinal. But then I'm projecting a 3D virtual body using augmented reality into space and using my phone to mimic performing a midline approach to the spinal, trying to get myself in between those two spinous processes in the interspinous space, that narrow trajectory there. And then I take the needle back, or my phone back, pretending it's a needle, and approach from a paramedian sagittal approach. And there's a paramedian approach to spinal, and you can suddenly appreciate how it makes a lot more sense. Now it gets even better with virtual reality. This is me the first time I put a pair of VR goggles on and tried to understand 3D anatomy through that lens. And people are using this technology already. This is Boyne Ballou, who's teaching regional anaesthesia anatomy using a particular piece of software and a VR headset. Then I was lucky and I managed to hook up with two anesthesiologists in New York. And three of us were in different locations, and we got into a physical space, and we were going through some anatomy, looking at the head and neck. And the two of us now are joining in the same space with Rohan Jotwani and John Rubin, and we were understanding. We were playing around with virtual anatomy 3D models, we were looking at the internet, we were watching videos. It's a mind-blowing space. And actually these guys are taking it to the next level. They're actually using it to plan how to do a block or a procedure in advance, so people can walk through doing a technique and they understand what they're doing. I'm going to show you something else now. This is using the Apple Vision Pro. This is Raj Gupta now, who's put his headset on, and he's now trying to correlate an ultrasound image he's generating using a real probe on himself and correlate it with 3D anatomy that he's moving around in physical space. And he used this and took it a next stage further. He's now doing some teaching on a model. He's getting the Azra Coags app to see if he can actually place a block in this person. Now going to pick up the probe. He's got the 3D anatomy lined up so he can correlate that with the image. And he's got some schematic anatomy to understand. He's got all of these things loaded up in virtual space, and then applies a probe and generates his ultrasound image. So this really opens up the potential for education in this new digital age. This is a really great review of anaesthesia in immersive virtual environments. So if you're interested, please do check this out. There's another group, Alvin Chuan and Graham McLeod, who have designed and validated a virtual reality regional anaesthesia training. This is incredible. The question is this the future? And it may well be, because if you can practice doing a block on a block or on a phantom, actually it might allow you to train in regional anaesthesia without necessarily performing a block on a real person. So we've talked a bit about how augmented reality and virtual reality can help, but what about identifying sonoanatomy? This is where artificial intelligence has a potential role, and it's already being used in regional anaesthesia. You can either have artificial intelligence integrated within an ultrasound machine or as a separate system, and it can highlight nerve, muscle, vessels. The question is it accurate and is it validated? Well, I can't really talk about artificial intelligence and regional anaesthesia without talking about this person. Of course, if you can guess who this is, you're very clever. This is a bow on the Loch Ness monster. So of course I'm talking about Dr. James Bowness. Now James has been involved in writing a whole host of papers looking at the potential effect of artificial intelligence on education and training in regional anaesthesia. I'm going to summarize what he said. So these papers have determined that artificial intelligence in regional anaesthesia may aid non-experts in training and practice. It may aid experts in teaching. And certainly, if you can teach better, it may improve ultrasound image acquisition and interpretation. I think that's a nerve. Let's just have a look and see what AI says. AI agrees. Okay, I'm going to carry on. As a result of all of this, it may increase patient access to regional anaesthesia. So if you're working in an institution where no regional anaesthetists are working that day, but somebody's been on a course, they've done a few blocks, but they just need somebody to give them some confidence, that's where this may have a role. However, they do have varying levels of accuracy. So if you look at the image on the left, this is artificial intelligence and humans trying to identify the superficial femoral artery in the part of the adductor canal. And you can see there's a great correlation between what AI says and what humans say. However, when you ask artificial intelligence and humans to identify the radial nerve in the image on the right, humans don't agree, nor does the artificial intelligence. So there is some issues, there's some potential issues with this, but I'm sure this will only get better as time moves on. So we talked about identifying sonoanatomy. What about needling and augmented reality? Well, this isn't new. Back in 2014, I met this very talented anaesthetist who had created a phantom block, which has got a spine model integrated into it. and that was connected to a computer where you could see 3D orientation of that phantom model. And you could place a needle into that phantom block and see where that needle was on this mocked up anatomy on the right hand side. But even better, they had a virtual ultrasound probe which you could place on the phantom and see what ultrasound image you were generating. So this is not new, but it's clearly an exciting area. Now, we've got phantom-based training here. There's a needle being inserted into a gel phantom, and you can see the potential generated ultrasound image, and you can see what that needle is doing in real time. And this isn't a real ultrasound image. This is one that's generated or simulated. The other thing you can do now is you can take a virtual probe and stick it on a phantom, and it will generate an image as if it were on a human, and then place a needle into that phantom and see what it would be like if you were performing a block. This is a femoral nerve block which has been simulated by the computer, and you can see what it's like to stick your needle in and out of that. That's fascinating. But rather than perform blocks on phantoms, wouldn't it be great if we could do human-based training? And one of the issues now with people not getting a chance to perform enough blocks is it's difficult to demonstrate competency. So here, this is a handheld probe being used to generate an image on a real human. And there's a special piece of kit here being held in the operator's left hand, which is a virtual needle. So if you apply pressure to that virtual needle to the skin, the needle will retract within the shaft of the holder, and it will look as if you're actually performing a block. So here's an example of an out of plane access to a vessel. You can see a virtual dot of this virtual needle, and if you rotate the probe to long axis, you will see that needle coming into view. So the needle's actually not penetrating the real human being, you're getting a real image, but you're getting an idea of what it might look like if you did it in real time. Now, this has actually been investigated. So this piece of kit was investigated on an exploratory study on models with looking at potential implications for training. And what they were able to determine was that if you were to analyze the performance of people using this technology, you could tell experienced operators from those that were less experienced. But at the moment, we don't have any evidence of impact on training, but it has the potential to make a difference. If you can practice a block on a real person without actually sticking a needle into them, it may be a way of developing competence in a particular technique. The next thing that's happened with ultrasound, of course, is that ultrasound has got smaller. You can actually hold what was the power of a cart-based machine in the palm of your hand. And there are a few examples, all of which I've used except for the one in the top right. But the resolution of these machines is improving, and you can do training anywhere, anytime, because they're so portable. Some of these systems even have integrated artificial intelligence and offer the ability to get remote real-time mentorship. So you can generate an image and ask somebody else to dial in and see what you're doing and give you advice. So what's next? Well, this is me actually watching a block I performed using one of these technologies on my Apple Watch. But could this be the way of the future? Who knows? Now, this is how we can actually integrate with virtual reality. So this is Raj Gupta again using a wireless probe, and that wireless probe is communicating directly with the virtual reality headset he's using. He's now using handheld gestures or hand gestures to adjust the depth and the gain, and all that he's got is holding an ultrasound probe and the virtual reality goggles, and that's it. So the ability to do a block with just two pieces of kit, no wires, is pretty phenomenal, and you can move that image wherever you want in real time. The other thing that's changing in the way that we're delivering education now is we were heavily reliant on face-to-face teaching, but actually because of COVID, we've had to be inventive. And now there's been an expanse of virtual meetings or hybrid meetings and webinars, and this has allowed people to attend a conference without physically being there. But there are even more options. There are, of course, video resources. If you just search for videos in regional anesthesia, you come across YouTube, Twitter, X, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram. And of course, regional anesthesia is really suited to viducation for a number of reasons. You can see the probe moving in real time and what you need to do to generate an image. You can identify the anatomy and the sonoanatomy in a small video, and you can access this information whenever you want on a whole host of devices just before performing a block. But there are some issues with regional anesthesia videos. It's who do you trust? And we all know that there's no quality control or content verification. There's no peer review. Do we know what the minimal acceptable content is for these videos? Because there's a risk that if you just watch a 2-minute video on a blog, that's all you learn. You won't learn the detail. And we know that the top videos are not selected by quality. This has been looked at by a whole host of papers here, where they've looked at regional anaesthesia education via YouTube, and they've come up with a number of conclusions. They basically said that videos are often used to learn regional anaesthesia, and there are some excellent videos out there, but the quality varies. And as we've said before, the short or top viewed videos miss some vital details, but it would be great if we had a rating system so we knew what the minimum content was and we could actually direct learners to curated content. The American Society of Regional Anesthesia have done this. They've got a best assessment rubric using the acronym PAIN, and if those videos that they've come across meet those criteria, they then feature on their website. So that's a way of directing learners to content. And I'd also like to flag up people that I follow. So if I look on my YouTube channel, I follow Jeff Gadsden on his Duke videos. Vicente Roquez has got some amazing YouTube videos, as does Kijin Chin. And of course, there is the Regional Anaesthesia UK YouTube channel. So these are some examples of channels that I follow. But it's not just about YouTube. There are other modalities and other bits of social media that can benefit us, such as TikTok and Instagram. Now, these are image or short video hosting platforms. Be careful about the content, because there's a lot of stuff in there that maybe you don't want to look at, and it can be addictive, but we do have some good regional anesthesia. And I'm going to highlight these people: Sarah Amaral, Blocker Girl, Vicente Roquez, Benjamin Fox, and Melody Herman. And they've all got really great regional anesthesia content presented in a fun way. Now, no lecture about me would be complete without talking about Twitter, which has now transformed into X, for better or for worse. When I first joined this platform, I joined it to learn, to link, and to laugh. And this is a little infographic I made a long while ago. And things have changed with X. And in fact, right now, as things stand, I've moved mainly across to a new app called Blue Sky. But when I did this lecture, I talked mainly about X. The main advantage with this is you could keep up with latest research and you can engage directly with authors. In fact, you can ask them questions and get access to a whole host of educational material. This is a great way of sharing knowledge and experience, and in fact, you have the ability to impact journal citations and to help disseminate research. There's a study here that looked at the alternative metric score, which is a mark of sharing on social media, and how that may have an impact on the number of times a paper is cited. But also, as journals have migrated from print form to online only, social media can help to promote and affect the impact factor of these journals as well. So that's something to bear in mind. The other thing that can happen with social media platforms is that something that's happening in a physical space at a conference, you can suddenly massively increase the reach of that information. This is from our virtual conference, the RAUK24 meeting. We managed to get messages from that conference out to over 20 million people. That's a fairly impressive way of sharing information. Is this going to be impacted by X as it is now? I suspect the answer is yes, but there will be other avenues and other social media platforms. And as I say, Blue Sky is one that I think will be potential. Now, during my time on X, I made a hell of a lot of friendships and collaborations with people that I hadn't met before. I wrote papers with these people. I became good friends with these people. In fact, some of them, Lee White is pictured here. I'm yet to meet him in person, but I've written at least 3 or 4 papers with him. So social media and X does have some positives. So what would I say is I want to warn you about? The negatives are that, again, the content that gets put out there doesn't have peer review. It can be a bit of an echo chamber, so you might be just following people that agree with you, and therefore you don't get challenged in your opinions. And sometimes you can over-egg something or overhype something without there being much evidence-based behind it. There is some trolling that can occur, and the nice thing about this new platform, Blue Sky, is that doesn't seem to be the case so far. But of course, you've got to monitor how much time you spend on it. You've got to think about well-being and not spend too much time on these platforms. But if you are going to look at some of these platforms, follow the hashtags regional anaesthesia, spelled the American or the English way, follow some people and follow some journals. If you do that, you might get some great regional anaesthesia education tips. A couple of other papers I want to push in your direction here. This is talking about how you can use social media for professional use, and also how important it is to get third-party validation of the data here. So this is something that's going to be happening in the future. Now at this point, we're just going to visit another part of the world to meet one of my friends.
Hi London. I'm Tanya, an anaesthetist from Down Under. I used to think regional anaesthesia was pretty boring. There was too much anatomy, too many differently called blocks, too many papers were a little bit dry, hidden behind paywalls. But digital education has changed all of it for me. It's made it fun, it's brought it alive, it's made me feel a part of it. Here I am, I've just finished work, I'm walking on the beach, I'm listening to Amit and Jeff on their Block It Like It's Hot podcast, laughing and learning. Wishing you all the best for RAUK24. I'll be following along the tweets, sending you all my love and best wishes. Good luck for the Bruce Scott, Amit.
Well, thank you very much, Tanya. That was Tanya joining us from Wollongong, and she very kindly segued me into the next bit where regional anaesthesia can have an impact. And of course, I'm talking about podcasts. The main advantage with podcasts is they're smartphone accessible, that many of them are free, and you can use them to augment learning, allowing for the fact that they're opinion based, but you can listen to a podcast while you're doing many other things. This conversational style is a way of taking information without it being so fixed and so formal. Do I have any recommendations? Well, I do, but before we get there, we're going to visit somebody who's a good friend of mine.
Hello from North Carolina. I wish I could be there in person, but when you win a debate against Amit at RAUK, you don't get invited back. Learning is so much better now. Having instant access to all the resources has democratized learning. It used to be you had to travel to an expensive workshop in a big city to get taught how these blocks were done, but now if you have a phone, you have thousands of hours of Amit or Kijin or Vicente or hundreds of others that I can watch on the train or in line at Starbucks or on the toilet. Okay, that last one's our little secret, okay? The pace of innovation has changed too. Can you imagine trying to popularize the QL9 block 20 years ago, waiting 9 months to see your case report in print, hoping that somebody actually reads it? Now we have Twitter journal clubs and journal-led webinars and online pro-con debates that add color and dimension and context to the hard science. We are truly living in a golden age of regional anesthesia education. Enjoy the meeting, and if you'll excuse me, I've got to go block it while it's still hot.
Thank you, Jeff. And of course, I'm talking about our podcast, Block It Like It's Hot, which at the time of the meeting had over 36,000 downloads. We've now just hit over 56,000 downloads. And the beauty about this podcast is we managed to reach all over the world. So I'm very grateful to have Jeff as a colleague and to be participating in that podcast as a way of sharing our love of regional anaesthesia. So I'm going to summarize now. We need to teach regional anaesthesia so that patients can benefit. We know that teaching using traditional methods is still valuable. There's nothing that will replace hands-on, face-to-face teaching. I think that is clearly the best. And we can enhance, but not replace that human interaction. That's a human interaction between the student and the teacher, but also between the practitioner and the patient. We don't want to be hidden behind these clever bits of gadgets and gizmos, because I think digital education is part of multimodal education. Now, I was going to summarize with a bit more, but actually we've got one more friend to visit in another part of the world, and she created such an amazing video, it seems right to include it here. So we're going to go and visit Claire.
History of Adult.
If I was young, it didn't stop you coming close. They took the credit for your second symphony, rewritten by machines, new technology, and now I understand the problems you could see. I met your children, what did you tell them?
I say, for me, what is the best one? It's the convertible, right, Iris? Remember, Claire.
Well, thank you so much to Claire Braganza for that great summary. So I think now what we can see is that we're no longer bound by space, by time, by geography, and technology can really shape the way we learn and teach. But not only just now, we can learn it throughout our whole careers. There's lifelong learning for all experience levels, but it's really important that we use validated tools and recommended resources. I think it's time that we embrace digital technology to inspire our learners, because the future of regional anaesthesia education will be a journey of endless discovery and extraordinary impact. I'm now going to finish with a few thank yous. I've got to thank all of my surgeons who have allowed me to practice regional anaesthesia on their patients to deliver great outcomes. They followed me through my journey, celebrated my successes, stood with me when things haven't gone quite according to plan, so I'm really, really grateful for them. I've got a whole host of fellows that I've had a chance of working with over the years, and I'm grateful to each and every one of them who've helped me to become a better teacher. They've given me feedback on my teaching techniques, allowed me to improve, make modifications, and hopefully make regional anaesthesia fun. I'm also fortunate in that I've got a whole host of teachers, role models, mentors, collaborators, friends and colleagues in regional anaesthesia. I'm grateful to them because, as I said, I've learned so much from them. They inspire me to do more and to be better, so thank you to all of them. I'm also going to thank all of the friends and colleagues that I've met via X, and here's just a few of them here: Robbie Erskine, Marianne Fox, Nabil El Kasabani, Sophie Farouk, Colin McCartney. A whole host of these guys have really helped me and supported me via a virtual platform where I otherwise wouldn't have had support. I mentioned my RAUK friends very, very fondly and multiple times during this lecture. I'm grateful for them for allowing me to lead them through a challenging period of time during COVID, etc. And we've learned and grown together, and I'm really proud of what's happened to the society since I've left them. Massive thank you to my family, to my wife, my kids, my mum, my sister, and to my grandfather, who's sadly no longer here. But again, I couldn't have achieved anything that I have achieved if it wasn't for them. So love you all and many thanks. I hope you've enjoyed this little whistle-stop tour through my Bruce Scott lecture. This QR code will take you to a Dropbox link where all of the references I've used during this presentation have been stored. I hope you found it useful. Many thanks.